capita than the compact ones. So a big difference. Now, notice there's variation. The sprawling ones aren't all the same, and the compact ones aren't all the same. Minneapolis, St. Paul's right in the middle, again. It's in the middle in terms of its land use pattern, development pattern, street network. It is in the middle when it comes to VMT. This may seem irrelevant in a sense because when you look at these places, Boston and New York and Providence versus Riverside, San Bernardino, and Greensboro, and so on, you could say, what does that have to do with the price of eggs? You know, I mean, Boston's never going to be like Atlanta, and Atlanta's never going to be like Boston. That's not true. The time frames we're talking about in climate action planning are so long, Boston could be more like Atlanta, or Atlanta could be more like Boston. It depends on, and it is a choice. I'm going to end with this quote. This is all a choice. This whole subject, we do not have to have a mean global temperature rise of 6 degrees, which would be disastrous. We don't have to have that. It's a choice, okay? So we can grow in one way or grow in another. I'm going to show you one more, and this goes to this issue of choice even more directly. These are 2 footprints for the Sacramento area from regional simulations, and one footprint is the old adopted plans for the counties and cities and what the Metropolitan Planning Organization was planning for. That's the one on the left, and they didn't like what they're getting. They're getting increased VMT, they're getting reduced transit ridership, and so on, with the sprawling pattern shown on the left. So they went through a very long and public participation intensive process to create a preferred vision on the right. And the difference, which was adopted and now is being implemented, the difference in VMT is 26% through 2050. So, you know, you have a choice. That's the lesson there. So the answer to the first question that I asked, EPA asked us to, EPA funded this growing cooler effort along with the Hewlett Foundation. And the first question they wanted us to ask was, you know, just how much could we reduce VMT per capita with compact development? And the answer is something in the order of 20 to 40%. That statistic has held up to scrutiny. There are a lot of, obviously, people taking, you know, are second guessing or taking shots. And I haven't seen anyone question the basic logic. 4 different literatures point to this order of magnitude, 20 to 40% reduction for each increment of new development. So the next 10,000 people who come to the Twin Cities, if they're in sprawl, they will generate 20 to 40% more VMT than if they're in a compact infill type pattern or transit-oriented pattern or whatever. 20 to 40%, it kind of depends on the exact development patterns in each case, but that's the order of magnitude. If you do the math through 2050, now not all that's 20 to 40% for new development. Not all the development will be new between now and 2050. There'll be some existing development, about 1/3 of the total, and not all the development will be compact or smart growth development between now and 2050. Work out the math, it's 12 to 18% reduction in VMT, metropolitan VMT, if we emphasize smart growth. And 12 to 18% may sound large to you or may sound small. It is roughly equivalent to the reduction in CO2 one would get if everyone who buys a gas-powered car, typical average car today, instead bought an average hybrid. So it's a fairly significant impact. Going back to the graphic I showed you before, I've now added in effect, it's the red line. VMT is down 15%. That's what we expect is feasible from the calculation I just showed you. And now the blue line is actually getting closer to the red line, but it's still not there. So the question becomes, what What would it take? What would it take to get down to that climate stabilizing level of CO2? A 33% reduction in CO2 by 2030. Is it even doable through a combination of policy changes? And we believe it is. In the book, in Chapter 8, we modeled the growth of VMT historically in the U.S. in terms of population density and highway lane miles and so on. The main way we'll get there is through higher price gas, which, if we're right, we will have anyway. But we will have probably cap and trade, because Obama has said he favors that. It just needs, and Congress has been toying with that for quite a while. So we'll have a cap and trade program in the U.S., and I think, and that will raise the cost of gasoline at least a little bit. Gas taxes could be increased. We could have congestion pricing. That's something I know that has been studied a lot here at the Humphrey Institute. All these things would raise the cost of travel, and that would have the biggest effect. Second biggest effect would be from a reduced spending on highways. Highways themselves, and this is not debatable based on the evidence that has been gathered over the last 10 years, highways themselves generate additional VMT. If you widen roads and reduce congestion, you make it possible for people to travel farther. Ultimately, you affect development patterns. So the second most important effect is to reduce the expansion, the rate of expansion of the highway system itself. Third is to increase population density. Fourth is to increase transit service levels. You put them together and you get 38% reduction in VMT by 2030, and that gets you down to that red line. Okay, so all this was just a lead into what, and I am trying to remember when I'm supposed to be done. How am I doing?
We started a little late, so 10 minutes.
10 more minutes. No, I want another 15.
Okay.
No. No, I'll try and do it in 10. So all of this leads to the policy stuff, which is really where the interest is. And I'm going to describe, I'm going to provide really two case studies. One is at the metropolitan level, because I know a lot of you are local activists and officials and planners. And then the other case studies at the state level, because I've been told a number of state legislators are here. So anyway, the local example is Portland, Oregon, and you're probably tired of hearing about Portland. But in this case, in particular, it is the place to study. I think there are a lot of good examples. I'm going to Salt Lake City. I think Salt Lake City is doing wonderful things, but it hasn't actually reduced its carbon footprint. And I worked in Charlotte, and I think they're doing wonderful things. But they haven't actually reduced their carbon footprint. But Portland, it appears, has. In 1993, it became the first U.S. city to adopt a CO2 reduction program. And then in 2001, the county and the city teamed up. The goal is to reduce carbon dioxide emissions to 10% below 1990 levels by 2010. And the thing that makes Portland so outstanding is it looks like they're going to actually meet that goal. A lot of people are, adopting goals and targets, but to actually do it, well, how are they doing it? A lot of it doesn't have anything to do with land use and transportation. Like they've got a very high recycling rate, and they've factored that into their inventory. They've got a fair number of green buildings now, factored that into their inventory. They've weatherized a lot of homes, and so on. So those things don't have anything to do with land use and transportation, really. But they do help. As a result of those things basically reducing CO2 emissions and transportation not increasing them too much, they've brought their, and this is 2004, that's as late as I could get, but they brought their CO2 emissions total, even factoring in growth, that's the total emissions, down to 1990 levels, actually a little below. And you can see the goal is the 10% below.